Just want to welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the 2021 Business Summit Funders Forum. I'm Joel Weed, Government Relations Coordinator with the Chamber of Commerce. The Business Summit is brought to you through the partnership of the Greater Peterborough Chamber of Commerce and Peterborough and the Kawarthas Economic Development. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for making this event possible. We've got the Business Development Bank of Canada, the Bank for Canadian Entrepreneurs, Nexicom, keeping you close while we all do our best to stay apart, and Microage Peterborough, we make IT happen. Our goal today is to provide you with knowledge of financial resources, opportunities, and best practices to help your business thrive. Feel free to submit questions into the chat. We'll try and get through as many as we can today, but if we don't get to yours, feel free to reach out to me or at joel@peterboroughchamber.ca. Or if you think of a question later and you want to send that through to us, please send it. I'll put my email in the chat in a minute. Our moderator today is Heather Hallahan. Heather is a senior account manager at BDC, where she works with entrepreneurs to help them grow and develop opportunities. She brings more than 20 years of experience in the financial and banking sector. She has a passion for business and is a great resource for your finance-related questions today. I'll turn things over to Heather now.
Thanks, Joel. It's a pleasure to be here today. Hello to all the participants and the panelists. Thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise. I thought I would take a moment to, thanks Joel for the intro. Again, been in the market for 15 years, 20 in the financial services industry, part of the BDC team here, and really proud to help support and help our local businesses grow and thrive. I thought I would take a minute now to introduce let our panelists actually introduce themselves. Perhaps you can share your name, obviously where you're from, and a little bit about your organization, and then we'll move on to some of the questions. Did you want to start? I'll just move across my screen. So Anne-Marie, did you want to kick it off for us?
Sure. Thank you, Heather, and thanks for inviting us to take part today. My name is Anne-Marie Kelleher. I'm with FedDev Ontario. I work out of our little Peterborough office when we don't have COVID. Right now, I'm working from home in Millbrook. I've been with the agency for 10 years. We deliver financing programs to local community groups like the Community Futures Development Corporations, and also direct to business in the form of 0% interest loans. So we look at creating jobs and economic growth across all of Southern Ontario. So our agency covers everywhere from the Windsor to Quebec border. So it's quite a large area, but we're a strong and mighty team. So I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks. Trevor, you're next on my order of operations here.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Let me turn my phone off so it'll stop dinging. Yeah, so I'm Trevor Crow with OMAFRA, which is the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. It's provincial. I started with OMAFRA actually in November, so I've only been here a few months. I'm in Picton, Ontario, Prince Edward County, where I grew up, and my office is in Brighton, but I'm a rural and economic development advisor, and I cover the counties of Peterborough, Northumberland, and Haliburton counties. So happy to be here and happy to be part of this discussion.
Great, thank you. Kim.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
It's a pleasure to be here today. My name's Kim Freeburn, and I'm the Regional Director with the CFO Centre, which is Canada's largest provider of what we call fractional CFO services. And we work with small and mid-sized clients who are scaling their businesses and perhaps dealing with problems and challenges that are preventing them from moving forward into the growth plans that they have. We provide advisory services and support, but we really work as the chief financial officer for that business owner in partnership with them and their senior teams to allow them the resources that they need in moving forward. I'm currently a resident of Peterborough and have been for a very long time. I'll say more than 2 decades and less than 4. And I've been a lifelong learner and a CPA in my career. And so I'm passionate about helping people achieve their financial goals.
Great, thank you. And Gail, last but not least.
That's okay. I'm Gail Morehouse. I'm with Community Futures, and we are funded by FedDev Ontario, and Anne-Marie was our account manager looking after us for as long as I can remember. We've been around for 35 years, our organization. What can I tell you? I think our specialty is really helping sole entrepreneurs who cannot get funding through traditional funding streams, such as your bank, things like that. So we also offer the Rural Relief and Recovery Fund at 0%, with our focus on those who've been turned down through the traditional areas. Although a lot of our clients have not been turned down through other areas, they just have a great relationship with us, and we work to try and help them be as successful in good times, but as we struggle through these pandemic times as well.
Great. Thanks, Gail. Thanks, everyone. So with that, I'll kick off some questions. So feel free to, I won't necessarily direct them to each of you individually unless I think it's a specific question for you. We can start and you can chime in on each response as we go along. So the first question I've got, and I think obviously we're here, it's a funding forum discussion. Access to capital is obviously a major concern or challenge for businesses, particularly in the midst of COVID. What opportunities should they be considering in terms of accessing capital? Do you want me to?
Come, do you want to?
I can start there, Heather.
Yeah,
Gail can as well.
Jump in. I won't. Yeah.
I would say come to Community Futures first.
Well, and that would be by Gail. I'm going to let you go first.
Oh, your plate. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Because we service so many of the businesses locally and within the county, Community Futures should or generally is the first stop for many businesses. When we've just been through the Relief and Recovery Fund, we've put out close to $3 million to local businesses, helping more than 73 individual businesses survive through this situation. So, and more than 50% of those who we helped are sole entrepreneurs, and 60% of that is through actual women-led organizations. So we all are competing for helping you succeed. So we just kind of reach different audiences. So I'm going to turn it to you, Anne-Marie, because you've got clients we can't reach.
For sure. And, I think Gail, gives a great example there. They, the CFDC locally actually delivered probably one of the largest number of loans for the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund across the province. So kudos to them. They did a great job getting the money out to where it needed to be through those loans. The CFDCs right now can provide loans under that program of up to $60,000. If a business is looking at requiring more money than that as a result of the COVID pandemic, they can also apply to FedDev Ontario. We ask that you only apply to either one. With that, you can apply for over 60,000 all the way up until 500,000 is the absolute max, and that would be for high priority sectors that have been greatly affected. What we look at funding typically is about 3 months of operating. In some cases, if it's a tourism business, we were looking at 6 months as well. The application is fairly straightforward. It's all web-based. And we try to, work through those applications as quickly as possible. But absolutely, in my opinion, your first stop should be the CFDC. I know Gail and her team have done a great job in terms of pathfinding for people. If they can't help you, they'll try to find a place that they can, whether it be at your local bank through CEBA, with Heather's team at BDC, or through one of the grant programs as well, although they're a little bit harder to come by these days, but definitely the 0% loans can be attained up until we just extended that program actually. So right now we're taking applications until June 30th at FedDev, and that will be for operating expenses up to September 30th of 2021. Again, there was lots in the budget too, so but nothing in regard to a further extension, but right now we are taking.
Everybody just went muted. All right, can everyone still hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, Heather,
All
I
right.
can.
Everything just went mute and quiet in my ears. So thanks, Anne-Marie. You mentioned something there in terms of looking for relief for 3 to 6 months of working capital or fixed expenses. Maybe Kim, maybe you could speak to this a little bit in terms of how can businesses gain a little bit more insight? What tools or resources should they be using or putting into place to gain that insight to forecast that far out and plan for some other unexpected events?
That's a great question. It's something that we see very commonly, particularly with small businesses who are limited in terms of their internal people resources. And particularly when it comes to sole proprietors, they wear every hat in the business. So it's really quite a challenge to juggle all of those functions that they have to. And so commonly what we see is a lack of financial acumen is what I would call it, but really a lack of focus on more the pragmatic details that people who don't work in finance really don't like to work in. And what we see is a lack of perhaps forecasting. Typically they're looking at historical numbers. And so from their external accountants, they're looking at information that might be old information. So if I were to provide a recommendation to any sole proprietor, anyone that's working with a small set of financial resources or experience, is to really start to look forward and having a plan and a forecast of where their spending is currently, where they want to spend, and really figuring out what that looks like week to week, month to month, year to year, so that they can have some visibility into not only where the dollars are coming in, but where the dollars are going out. I hear common things like, I'm doing very well and my business is growing, but at the end of the month, I don't know where my money went. And so it's really bringing things back to a very simple structure of tracking expenses in categories that make sense and looking at that on a more regular basis, not waiting until the end of the year or the end of the month, but really getting involved in what's happening from a cash flow standpoint in their business.
That's great. Thank you, Kim. And I guess this would be to all the funding partners who are actually providing access to funds. How important is that entrepreneur's ability to produce that information in getting approval or acceptance of the services that you're offering?
Well, Heather, I can answer that one in terms of a FedDev perspective. We were, for this program in particular, for regional relief and recovery, we were taking on audited statements, but we were expecting to be able to have at least 2 to 3 years to show us. We generally under our programs, we only accept audited statements, but in this case, with some of the smaller businesses, we were able to lessen that requirement, which was good. But again, having that in place and showing that you were profitable prior to COVID and that you've got some planning in place is very important in terms of our programming.
Mm-hmm.
I would say with ours, it was very similar. We, because of the quick turnaround, we weren't asking for audited financial statements or anything like that. And we helped them pull the numbers together in most cases. We did want to know that we were investing in organizations that were successful prior to COVID so that we could also continue to be successful during the pandemic. But we went through with them the categories we were asking for the expenses on and really kind of looked at, were they reasonable? And that's all we could really go on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Trevor, maybe you can share a little bit from your perspective in terms of the types of businesses that you might be supporting and how that works.
Yeah, sure. OMAFRA has traditionally supported food-based businesses, and that includes producers like farmers across the board and processors, and right down from, commercial bakeries to, anyone that's getting like a labeled food product out to market. So we kind of support businesses across that value food chain. Just to go back, I'm listening to this because I'm learning, from you guys as well in terms of the type of support services you offer. For us with OMAFRA, we have a number of different programs like RED, Rural Economic Development Program, which is for in this case, if you're a registered nonprofit, it might be something you consider later this year. And we also have our CAP program, which is Canadian Agricultural Partnership for producers and processors. And so that's anticipated to open up later in May. There should be an announcement. But all that to say, I do get a lot of inquiries from businesses that are saying, what kind of funding is out there? Like grants. They want the grants, right? And I sometimes push back and say, well, if you have a business case, and it makes sense, and you have a business plan to support that, I would strongly consider just getting a business loan. And, with the BDC and the CFDCs offering 0%, they don't have the typical strings that a grant program has, where you have to wait forever to find out if you get awarded it, so it doesn't meet your timeline. You have all this reporting to do. There's the eligibility of, what exactly you're trying to do, and oftentimes it's at odds with that. So I always encourage people to be considering business loans if you're looking at expanding. And, in this case, it's just trying to keep your head above water, which is really unfortunate. But, that's really my message in this, is to, really, like Gail said and Kim said, be thinking about the future, how your business is going to pivot and take advantage of the changes that are coming. Because we're not out of the woods yet. I really don't feel that way, because you look at the rising costs of inputs for raw materials. Are you going to be able to pass that along to your end customer? These are some future challenges that I think we're going to see even this year. I saw an article yesterday where P&G are now, Procter & Gamble are raising all their prices because their raw material prices are going up. And, taxes are going to go up as well, as to help pay for all of these, government subsidies and programs. So these are just, as a business owner, these are some of the things I would be thinking about. So.
Great. Gail, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, because we've just started a new financial year, we were obligated to make sure that all of our programs had ended for March 31st. So the timing is not great. But one of the things that people forget about is that the Rural Relief and Recovery Fund has a huge portion of it that is like a grant. It's non-repayable, but they don't have to pay it back. So if you were getting $40,000 with that, 25% of it you don't have to pay back if you had it paid by December 2023. So that's really a good reason as to, that's $10,000 if you got 40, as to how you could work that into your business. So there is grant money. You just have to really understand how it all comes together. One of the other things I would say is, if your issues that you're dealing with in your business are not related to COVID, then there is also, we do a microloan up to $20,000 that we get out to you within 24 or 48 hours. And on the bigger ones, we partner with the other banks. Heather, we partner together. I think we've got a few deals on the go with BDC, where we go in to really kind of help the business with larger scale items. So there is different kinds of funding packages available, be it our regular term loans, which are Prime Plus 2. We have other ones we're giving out at lower rates even than that, because of special issues or sectors we really want to be successful in. And we have the microloans, which, we're not looking at any security. We're just looking at how we can really help a small business get started quickly. I mean, it could be you need money for inventory because it's been really, really tight and we're now moving into spring. Your landscape organization, so you need money just to get you going from that. So there's lots of different ways in which we can help and give you funding to make you successful through this season and many more to come.
Great. Kim, both Trevor and Gail bring up a good point in terms of the different types of capital that's available in the market. We hear grants, non-forgivable or forgivable loans, 0% interest, some with terms and conditions attached to them, some portions forgivable. What should businesses be considering when they're looking at all these options that are in front of them?
Great question. I mean, there are a tremendous number of options available, and maybe more so now than have ever existed. And there are lots of creative ways to go about obtaining funding or enhancing funding. I think it's important to know that not one size fits all. So I would look at considerations of what's the maximum we need and what's the minimum we need. Most people try and find a finite dollar amount, but maybe that's what they need right now. They haven't looked far enough ahead in their yearly cycle to say, well, at our peak time, it might be a little bit more. So having a range in terms of what their funding needs might be. They also need to look at the timing. I think maybe it was Trevor that mentioned this, but there is a timing involved in getting grants and getting funding. So thinking far enough in advance is something that's important. And that's where the annual plan comes into play. Having a strategic plan that is financially focused on when will I need it, how will I use it is really important. And making sure that they're smart about using funds designated for one particular purpose on that purpose, not using it somewhere else. So borrowing from Peter to pay Paul is not a great financial strategy when it comes to funding. Try and keep it very specific and targeted for the purpose that it's used for. Because what happens when you do those types of things, it erodes and it gets used for other things. And then you look down and all of a sudden you find you're short on cash. So those are some of the things that I would look at, really a range of amounts, what you might be using it for, really making decisions that are focused on the here and now, but have a little bit of future perspective attached to that. And sometimes I'll just add that hope is not a strategy when it comes to funding. You can't hope that COVID's going to go away tomorrow. You can't hope that that things are just all of a sudden going to turn around. So within your strategy, you also need to look at what's the worst case scenario. What if I can't do this in my business? Where am I going to get funds? And try and build up those contingency areas and the funds available in those contingency areas that will help you when and if those occasions happen. It helps with sleeping at night when you have a number of different avenues to go with.
Great,
I'm going to segue with Kim's comment about sleeping at night. I can't imagine the kind of stress that a lot of businesses are under right now with the anxiety, and even their employees as well. That uncertainty, that, not knowing whether your business is even sustainable anymore, even as things recover, it's really tough. And I empathize with that, but I think, I'm an economist and I'm an optimist, but at some point you have to seriously consider, is it worth the risk involved to continue? And I hate to say that because we all want to see businesses be successful. But if you're just digging the hole deeper and deeper and getting more and more in debt, I would get some consultation, talk to friends and family and other business partners, and get kind of a well-rounded view of, do you really want to be continuing in this the way that it's going, or do you need to pivot and have a lifestyle change? Because if it's causing you health issues, if it's causing you to not sleep at night, you have to really question whether it's even worth it. And I know for many businesses, you've sank not just financially, but your whole heart and soul into a business. And so it's something to, make sure you talk about it and discuss it with people, and get some mentorship, get some people around you thinking about, what am I really going to do here?
I just wanted to mention that both Kim and Trevor have made some really, really great points. And I would add to that is one of the things that's our responsibility is to make sure that you're not in over your head and that you have the capacity to pay it back. And that is so important. So where you might be considering that if you were turned down, that it's a negative, you're also could be turned down because we really want to support you and not drive you further into debt than what your business is capable of enduring. So Kim, you had some wonderful points there. And I think the whole strategy is not hope. Hope is not the strategy. I really love that. I jotted it down. Thank you.
Well, it's important too, as we think through this, when we're looking at financing and looking at funding, debt service ratio is a phrase that's used by organizations. And what I see with our clients is that they really don't understand what debt service ratios mean. They don't understand that, and this is a common situation. They have property, they have assets, they have buildings, but they can't service the debt. And what that means is that they can't pay the regular interest payments and or principal payments of that debt, because all of their assets and all of their liquidity, and it's not liquidity, it's tied up in fixed assets. So what you don't have there is the ability to have cash coming in to pay for that debt. And Gail is absolutely right. The ability to service the debt is intrinsically important. Can you make the minimum payments? Can you still have a little bit left over at the end of the day to pay your payroll, to pay your HST, to pay your mortgage payments? So they look at a lot of those different factors of what are you actually paying now? And do you have the ability with the cash that you have coming in to be able to add a little more debt and a little more interest and a little extra payment on top of that? Or is that going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? And no one wants that. So from a successful business strategy, it's working and living within your means and figuring out what that is, and then manage your business accordingly with a good growth strategy to get you where you ultimately might want to be. But sometimes, especially right now, patience is a virtue. It's a waiting game in some ways right now, just trying to get through the challenges that we have with COVID and supply and demand. And, this too shall pass. So how can we plan forward for it?
Thanks, Kim. I do. I really appreciate your comments around planning and looking ahead, because it is true. I mean, it's tough when you're living in the moment, but to be able to sort of foresee and plan ahead and understand what taking on more debt might mean, or not, or seeking other sources of financing, whether it's equity or not paying yourself. Like, there's so many facets that having that longer term plan will help you navigate and ultimately, I think, make that call in terms of what's the right solution for your business. The other question that I had here is around, it's the sort of the upside of COVID, and you've touched on it a few times in terms of supply and demand, but those businesses that are thriving, that are now growing very quickly and trying to keep up financially from a cash flow perspective, are there programs in place that could support those businesses as well that are growing at a rapid pace?
Heather, I can tell you from a FedDev Ontario perspective, we do have a number of programs that can help businesses scale up and diversify and implement innovative practices within their business. They're generally larger size projects. A lot of our smaller ones, like our projects that are delivered more at the local level, are usually done through Gail's group at the Peterborough CFDC. We recently, now it just closed, was a Rural Innovation Initiative Eastern Ontario, where there was money there available for businesses. So the budget on Monday had a lot of information in it, but there was also a lot of programs there, a lot of hope. I know we can't build that strategy on hope, Kim, but hopefully maybe some of these programs that would be launched can assist with that as well. I know tourism was mentioned. We were actually very glad to be able to make an investment in the Peterborough area tourism economy through the Resiliency Fund that Peterborough and the Kawarthas Economic Development delivered in partnership with the CFDC. So that was a start there in terms of COVID. But I know from an agency perspective at this point, I don't think anybody expected us to still be dealing with relief from COVID implications in at this time in April of 2021. We were hoping to be back onto recovery, but the third wave has obviously extended that, and now we're kind of still looking at relief until June. However, I do anticipate that early this summer we will have a number of new programs that might be launched. But if a business is looking right now in terms of expanding and they are looking at maybe a 0% interest loan, definitely send them our way. We'll definitely speak to them and see if we can find a match for a program that way. Definitely.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have? Yep, go ahead, Kim. Yeah.
Something that I see often with clients is that while they're scaling up and while they're growing, they use a lot of their lines of credit. So their current active line of credit for such things as purchasing equipment and doing projects. There are other types of funding that are available through all kinds of institutions, banking, BDC. I'm sure Community Futures has that type of funding, as does Anne Marie's organization. But really being strategic about how you use your line of credit. And if it's a working capital or an operating line of credit, use it specifically for that. And if you're buying a piece of equipment that you're going to be using to scale up your business or to make it more efficient, maybe you're enhancing what you're doing or adding different product lines, proceed to look at specific funding for equipment, which can be amortized over a longer period of time. The equipment is usually used as an equity for that loan, as opposed, and it frees up your operating line, which can then be used to buy more inventory, to pay for your accounts receivable. So think about what other options, depending on how that business is growing, where you can allocate funds differently so that you're not using that really, really important line of credit that's needed in a fast growing business for its working capital needs.
Thank you. Trevor, I saw your hand up too.
Yeah, I'll answer it a little bit differently. So you had asked kind of how things are changing in the marketplace and because of COVID. And with related to food-based businesses, we've seen a lot of Peterborough labeled producers or products that maybe normally had been distributing to restaurants, and that market dried up, and then they're all of a sudden having to look, okay, well, where else can we distribute to? So there's been a lot of focus on grocer programs, and so even tomorrow, I have meetings with plant-based meat alternative company in Peterborough, and a gluten-free bakery as well, to meet with Metro. And Metro Grocer has a buyer program, and OMAFRA works quite closely with Sobeys and Foodland and Farm Boy and a number of those. And a lot of these companies are now looking at, okay, well, how do we get distribution in Ontario to all the grocers, knowing that that's a market that's actually growing. And we've seen a lot of restaurants pivot to kind of become a niche grocer, and so we are seeing this pivot where there's these new markets opening up, and the businesses are now now saying, okay, now have this contract with Sobeys or Metro. You can literally take that to the bank, so to speak, to increase your expansion or production capacity. And I've often referred folks to BDC and the CFDCs as well to say, well, maybe not take it to the bank, but you could also maybe try these routes as well to help to make sure you deliver on those client expectations.
That's great. Thank you. I guess this one is sort of a generic question. Every business is facing their own set of challenges, most of which they can't control. What's something that you think they could focus on that they can control? Maybe I'll start with Gail, just because you're off mute.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
What can they control? Well, I'd have to say what has surprised me is the number of businesses that are being successful in this market. I was kind of afraid when we first came into this that because we represent over 200 businesses in our portfolio of $10 million, we have supported a fair amount of restaurants in Peterborough, and the impact of what their business is going to be like. But what has really surprised me is two things. One is the success they've made because they've looked at different ways to do business. So it's more about the individual's mindset and how they've pivoted. So we have not seen the landscape is better than we anticipated. And I'm, very, very helpful for that. The second thing I would say is I have noticed a huge amount of gratitude. And that comes from, instead of having to get huge grants, people have been very, very grateful getting the $2,500 grants that helped with PPE. So I am seeing the two things that are both very positive in our community. And I'm also very excited about how other businesses have come around to try and support those who have not been quite as successful. So I think as a community, we're in a great spot to be able to move ahead.
I agree. Anne-Marie, yeah.
Sure, just building on what Gail said there too, I think, things that I've noticed as well, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, the people that had the digital platform already in place, I think, were able to make those changes quite quickly and still be able to supply their client base and continue to build on that success. They were not well prepared, but obviously they were able to shift and still meet client demand. So I think people should really look at taking advantage of some of the digital programming opportunities that are going to be out there, whether it's through advice or maybe assistance with actually setting you up on that platform, to be a program available too where people can get assistance in actually navigating the site and working it if they don't have that type of technological background. So, definitely I think that should be a focus for everybody, because this isn't going to go away. The market isn't going to go back to normal immediately, not even in short term, in my opinion. And I think what that also does is, people, like Gail said, really found, especially locally and on a regional basis, that they have a loyal clientele. But I think something businesses should be looking for is how can they develop a new clientele while still remaining loyal to their old one as well. So just thinking about different ways that they can operate, I think, is going to be important.
Great.
I think for I come from a farming background, and in farming there's this 5% rule, which is basically, if you can decrease your expenses by 5%, increase the price you get on your products or services by 5%, and then what's the third thing? Basically have better yields by 5%, then it's not 15%. It actually compounds to be 130% increase on your profitability. So I would suggest, thinking along those lines and those incremental, sharpen your pencil, so to speak, in terms of this year and how you can remain profitable. The other thing I think that goes unmentioned is the workforce. And I know that there's chronic workforce shortages, and I think it's only going to get worse, especially for frontline staff and the hospitality sector and that sort of thing. And so I would suggest, especially during this stressful time, make sure that you're in tune with the needs of your employees. Be open with them, make sure that they're happy. Even if they're not currently employed right now, keep the conversation going, ask them how they're doing, make sure that you're part of their future plans, that sort of thing, because that's your biggest asset right now are your employees in the future of your business. And so if that's not on your radar, which it certainly should be one of your top 3.
That's great. And Kim, go ahead.
I love the numbers analogy. Of course, I'm an accountant, right? So when Trevor says that 5 plus 5 plus 5 doesn't equal 15, he's absolutely right. We have a slogan is that the numbers that really matter. So it's all about small increments. It's all about making small changes because they do have an exponential impact over a long period of time. The one thing I would say to people that are out there struggling is to really ask for help. I think that there's a bias to being afraid, maybe that they don't know what they don't know, being embarrassed to ask for help, and really being uncertain as to who to go to ask. And there are tons of other resources available out there, whether it be coaching, and I'm not talking about resources that cost money. I'm talking about people that are willing to volunteer and give of their time. Organizations that will coach and mentor people, that will have discussions with people at no cost, just to get them moving in the direction that they need to. All of our organizations that we're involved in here in the panel today provide those types of resources, and we'll have conversations and we'll help people. But I say we encourage people to not be embarrassed to ask. We are all in this together. And there are lots of resources and lots of skills out there, and putting up a hand is the best thing that you can do when you're uncertain, rather than try and go it alone. That's like pushing a rope up a mountain, and it can be a hard go when you don't open that up. So look at your networks, look at the people that you know, ask the people that you've worked with in the past if they know someone, or call up a stranger. Call Gail or Anne Marie or Trevor and say, hey, I saw you talking about funding. Here's my situation. What do you suggest? Who do you think I can talk to? And that's why we're here, is to really help our communities and our businesses move forward to be successful and reach their goals. But we're in it together. So help support ourselves by asking to others who are available. We're all willing to donate time to talk to people and make them successful.
Gail, I saw your hand up there.
What I would also add to that is the more we understand and know about what you're going through, the better it is in helping us design programs and go after funding to help you be successful. An example would be the tourism, because we know the needs of tourism really well. We were able to work with Anne Marie and get tourism dollars for Peterborough. What ended up happening, we got double the request. And so, we have a plan that we're putting together to go and ask for more and make it more of a 5-year plan. So if we understand your problems, then we are in a better position to make the workshops match what your needs are, bring in the speakers that really would make a difference. And I would say we just finished in the end of March the ASAP program, which was a grant program where we paid for professionals to help you get the professional expertise that you needed. So some of them ended up using BDC for their specialized programs. We worked with some lawyers, we worked with accountants, we worked with people who can help you with your business strategy, not a business plan, a strategy for pivoting and turning. And we'll work at developing things for your needs, but we need to know what your needs are. So don't hesitate to drop us a line and let us know, this is where I'm struggling, and we can really work to try and match what your needs are, or direct you where the accessibility to that service is already there. Because one thing, we work well together in Peterborough in that we're not wanting to duplicate services. If someone else is doing it, we are going to partner with them to get the job done.
That's great. Thank you. I thought maybe I'd open up the chat if there's any questions. I don't know, Joel, do you have any come into you through the chat?
No, I don't have any questions yet.
Okay.
So if anybody has any, feel free to submit
Anyone
them.
out there, you have any questions? You've got a bunch of people here who'll be happy to answer questions and help out. If they're there, yeah, go ahead, Anne-Marie. Yeah.
In our panelist chat here, Braden from the CFDC has mentioned the website to share maybe with participants. So I'm not sure if that's something we could send out later, Joelle. It's the Innovation Science Economic Development website, but it lists all the resources that are available for businesses and gives the contacts of where to go. We also at FedDev operate the Canada-Ontario Business Services line. We can share that information. They have a wealth of information. You can call up on any topic and they will put together a package for you and send that as well. It's a really great untapped resource. So that's something else that perhaps we can share with the attendees as well, just as a resource.
Yeah, if we're talking about resources right now, I would really encourage the participants to subscribe to the Ontario Food Bulletin. So if there's any funding announcements coming out or any news within that industry, if you're in that industry, subscribe to it because that'll be the first place to find the information. And just I suggest sending me an email and I can add you to the bulletin list for Peterborough.
That's great. While we're looking to see if any questions come in off from the participants, for those offering funding or programming, what's like not in terms of specifics, but like what has a really successful application looked like? Like what key pieces did they have in there, and like how quickly were they able to get that information to you? Trevor, your hand shot right up.
I just got done reviewing all some rural economic development funding applications, and so that was a fun exercise. But one thing I can say consistently is, start now getting quotes or proposals from suppliers if you're looking at expanding, if that's equipment purchases or you're needing to hire a consultant or any kind of service or that sort of thing. Get it now. Make sure you're in tune with availability, especially with supply disruptions and that sort of thing. And then when you do the application, you can include that quote or proposal as an appendix to it. And then make sure your application actually lines up with that proposal in terms of the breakdown and what you're actually asking for. I find that was missing quite a bit. And so just be thinking about those things.
Anne-Marie.
Just to build on Trevor's statement a little bit there, and a topic that Kim mentioned earlier too about funding takes time to get, but one of the things that we've developed over the years is a checklist of what needs to be submitted with the application. Mm-hmm. So I really encourage people that are applying to make sure they include everything in the application process, because by the time it gets to the person assessing it, if they have to go back and forth with the client to get what they need and follow up for more information, it can add on to that timeline. So, if we're looking for an expedited type of decision, having everything together and following the checklist would be really helpful.
Great.
I agree with the checklist idea. My team are led by Braden. We can approve a loan under 20,000 within and have a check in your hand within 48 hours. The hardest part for us right now is getting 2 signatures when we're all in different locations, but we can work that quickly. But on a larger deal because we're led by a board that of volunteers. It will take time to go to the loans committee and get approved by the board. So you could be delayed 2 weeks to a month, but really kind of working to get all the material together. Another thing I would kind of mention is that I liked how Kim talked about thinking of the bigger strategy, because often an organization will ask for just enough to get them through now rather than the bigger picture. And well, you may only need $5,000. I'm talking a small amount. You may only need $5,000, but get approved for $20,000. That way we can disperse it as you require it, or it's not quite a line of credit, but it would really kind of work on supporting your business. Not having enough can be as harmful as not having any. So I would really kind of suggest that. And Kim had some great concepts and ideas on how to pull all that together. Thanks, Kim.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really important factor. You won't know if you don't ask. And so if you think you might need 15, but you think you might only get approved for 10, ask for 20. And so always shoot for the stars, and maybe you're going to get the 15 that you wanted and you asked for, and maybe you're only going to get the 10 that you really need. But I would say ask for what's going to fit your business. And then what I'd add to the conversation is the checklist is a fantastic idea. Also think through when you hand over that checklist and that information, which, maybe it's this big, maybe it's this big, but plan forward for success. And what I mean by that is assume you're going to get the loan and set your reporting up to be able to track the information that those organizations are going to need on a monthly basis. Usually not weekly, but on a monthly basis. They might want to know what your AR and your inventory and your percent current is. They may want to know what your monthly sales. So create your own tracking mechanism that can be really easily populated, so that when that information is due on the 20th of every month, that it's handy and accessible, and it doesn't become an administrative strain. Because as an owner manager, you're wearing a lot of hats. The last thing you need to do is have a lot of boxes to check every month just to maintain the administration on some of your loans. So create that file, put it in a big binder, put it on the shelf, be able to access it and pull it off the shelf when you need it. But set the information tracking up in a really simple format that's going to meet your lender's needs. And then you don't have to do it every month. You have something and a tool that's easy to use.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could add just another thing is, when you're putting your package together, remember that the person you're talking to is going to be your advocate in trying to get you the funding. They're usually presenting it to a committee or to someone else who's going to make the decision. Most credit decisions are at least a two-step process, so that two people are involved in making a decision about it. So give them all the material they need to be an advocate for you. And specifically, if you have a bruised credit, don't hide it. Tell us what we need to know to represent you fairly on it, because I would rather know why your credit score is the way it is versus, oh, they've got this credit score and it becomes a negative. If I can advocate, my score is like this because I was laid off for, 6 months, I had difficulty paying my bills on time, and here's the impact of it. That's an easier story because, now you're working, it happened previously, and you've owned it. So when it comes to credit is based on trust. It's based on a relationship that you've built. So own it and present it in whatever way it needs to be. Having a bruised credit is not something you need to run away from.
No, well said. Thanks, Gail. I agree. I would say the most successful financing transactions that I've been a part of have really been those where the owner is truly transparent and is able to give me the information I need when we need it, and really is just able to present it to me so that I can exactly advocate for them to get the transaction done. Because I think that's what all of us here on the panel are here for, is to advocate for the clients that we serve, whether it's helping them in their back end with their financing and getting things in their house in order, from Kim's side, to funding programs, to loans, to the smaller, some of the micro stuff that your folks do, Gail. We're all here to help, and I think you know, we're all certainly open to having those conversations. If you're not sure, the best response is to just ask. I don't see any other questions that have come in. I guess just keeping mindful of the time. Does anyone have any final words of wisdom? Just looking at my agenda here before I close off. I think we're right on time. It's great. Thank you, all of you. You've certainly given some really valuable information to our entrepreneurs who are on the call with us today. It's been a pleasure hosting, and look forward to when we can do these things in person again. Joel, I'll hand it back over to you if you've got anything to say.
No, just gonna wrap things up. Thanks everybody. Thanks to our panelists for joining us here, and this has been it's been very good conversation. I appreciate all of your expertise and advice that you're offering. The session has been recorded, so we'll make sure we'll share that out. But as well, if you know that there's more people that might have benefited from this, then feel free to share it or reach out to us. And as well, if there's questions that you think of later, anybody that's watching, please send those to me. I put my email address in the chat there, and I'll reach out to the panel and anybody else that may be able to help you with that. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Heather.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.